Hey guys, I'm back. In this episode, I'm going to be doing a draft video part 2 of my fantasy draft. Now, why am I doing another fantasy draft? Well, I kind of didn't like my first one. I really didn't like my first one, and I really wanted to change it up. So anyway, guys, here is my part 2 of my fantasy draft. This is going to be a lot different. I've added in some rules and I've added in some things that I want to point out. So anyway, I'm going to try and explain this out as much as I can as I go along. Anyway, there's going to be a draft slot. There will be some draft slots, and I'll be going over all the draft choices that I've made, and I'll be trying to explain them the best I can and why did I move them to different brands. So each one is going to be, up to why I moved them, and there will be certain reasons why I moved them, whether if you agree with them or not. I've also come to the conclusion that certain draft picks that I have made in this draft, I'll be leaving them up to you to see if you think I made the right decision with most of these draft choices. So some of these draft choices.
Did you turn off my washing machine?
No. Sorry about that. I hadn't. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that, guys. I had my mum just come right into my room. Where was I? Oh yeah, some draft picks will be left up to you to see if you actually agree with them or not. So in that way, it will be much more easier to see if you guys think that my draft picks might be good, or if they are bad, and who would you sub in for these slots if you disagree with them. I also come up with an idea that I thought this would be good if WWE want to do it in this direction. That is the world champions, like the Universal and WWE champions, being traded to different brands. In my opinion, it should be to every 3 or 4 years the world champion gets traded. Now, the reason why I came up with this idea is because in the early 2000s, when the draft was around, the WWE and World Heavyweight Championships were around, and you would see, like every few years, like every maybe 2 or 3 years, the WWE and World Heavyweight Championships would change brands depending on if they want to move them or not. That's an idea I put in there. It's like, it could be an idea for WWE if they want to do it, like every 3 to 4 years, the Universal Champion and the WWE Champion, depending on who that could be, could switch brands. That's just an idea I came up with, in case if people like that idea. And obviously, I'm going to tell you guys this: the Raw Women's and Tag Team Champions for Raw and SmackDown's Tag Team and Women's Champions won't be changed. Won't be changing brands, because it'll be really, really stupid to see, it'd be really stupid to see 2 blue titles on a red brand and 2 red titles on a blue brand. It would be pretty silly. It'd be pretty silly. So that's why I don't think the Raw Tag Team and Women's and SmackDown the Tag Team and Women's titles for Raw and SmackDown won't ever change. So that's that out of the way. And what else did I throw on there? Oh yeah, I also added in 5 draft picks for NXT, because I think there are going to be a lot of call-ups this year. That's how confident I am with call-ups. I think there's going to be quite a lot of call-ups, an equal of 10, which is like 5 for each brand. So 5 for Raw, 5 for SmackDown. So I think there's going to be about at least 10 people called up to the main roster. I did leave some examples on there, but I'm not going to go over the examples. Anyway, guys, let's get on with the draft. To the list I made here, it's going to be very hard for me to, look at my list because of where my camera's positioned and where my camera is positioned, and I don't want to, don't want you guys to see me on camera as I'm going over it. So, the first trade that I made, and yeah, see, the first trade that I made is AJ Styles to Raw for Seth Rollins. Now, would you guys agree with that trade? And would you go through with this trade? Which is what I'm going to say to you guys right now. Would you agree to this trade or would you not agree to it? The reason why I decided this is because I think AJ Styles and Seth Rollins both need a brand change. I think they both need a brand change, and I feel like those two guys, I believe those two guys were the #1 draft picks when 2016, when they did the draft in 2016. I believe AJ Styles and Seth Rollins were the first two people chosen in those draft picks that year. If my memory is correct, Styles and Rollins were both #1 picks for SmackDown and Raw when the draft was re-brought back. So, seeing the #1 draft picks changing brands, I think that would be pretty good. Styles could be on Raw for another year, but honestly, I'm gonna tell you guys this: there's really not a lot of people on Raw that you could trade Styles for, probably besides Finn Balor and even Seth Rollins. Some people could say Samoa Joe. Some people could say Samoa Joe and among other people, but Monday Night Raw really just doesn't have a big roster, in my opinion. So that's the reason why I came up with that. But let me know if you guys actually agree with that trade or not. The next trade that is on here is mid-card. Baron Corbin to Raw for The Miz. Now some people might wonder, well, why the hell would you move Miz? Well, Miz, obviously, even though I'm not a big fan of The Miz, even I will agree, The Miz was definitely better on SmackDown. SmackDown really upped his career, in my opinion. SmackDown was definitely the brand for him, and it really made him the star that he is. So, and Baron Corbin being moved to Monday Night Raw, I think it's time for Baron Corbin to be moved, in my opinion. He's been on SmackDown since 2016. I've kind of always pictured Baron Corbin as a Raw guy, in my honest opinion, him chasing the Intercontinental Championship if the Intercontinental Championship stays on Raw. And that's another thing I'm going to say. That I honestly think the Intercontinental Championship will stay on Raw, but considering that you guys have already heard Seth Rollins and The Miz being name dropped already, you're probably expecting Finn Balor. Soon. So yeah, I guess in this little draft thing I've come up with, that I'm going to be switching the US and IC belts around. But when WWE do it, I just don't see them moving it. The next one I've got here is Tag Team. Now this one might be a little bit weird to you guys, but at the same time I think this one could be a good one. The Ascension to Monday Night Raw for Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel. Now some people might think, oh my god, you're moving them to SmackDown with The Miz. Now, I think Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel by themselves as solo acts isn't really that good. But them as a tag team, yes, I think them as a tag team would be good. And them being on SmackDown would definitely be better for them. And honestly, I honestly kind of pictured Curtis Axel and Bo Dallas more as SmackDown people anyway. I see them, fitting really well on SmackDown. Not just because, of The Miz. I reckon they should be done with The Miz by the end of WrestleMania. And The Miz needs to start being on his own and just being with Maurice. I think that's all that needs for The Miz. Or maybe they can just have The Miz take a break. Because the fact that, Maurice has now got a child, so maybe they can have him lose at WrestleMania, and then they could have a storyline where he turns on Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel. I think Dallas and Axel will definitely be better as a tag team, as their own team, and that's just my honest opinion. I think they'll do great as a team, especially on SmackDown Live. Anyway, next we've got another tag team, and I think this is a good trade. Honestly, I think this is a good one. Gable and Benjamin to Raw for the Revival. Honestly, I think that one is a very good one. All because I think Gable and Benjamin do need a change of scenery. Even though Benjamin has just come back, I think a change of scenery for those guys would be really, really good, them being on Raw. I think that would be really good. At least it will give Raw some extra tag teams, and it'll give Raw some tag teams they can use. And can you and imagine the dynamic? And can you guys imagine the dynamics between Jason Jordan and Chad Gable? Oh man, that I think that would be good. I think that'll be good. Jason Jordan and Chad Gable as enemies. I reckon that would be pretty good. And the Revival, I think they're better off on SmackDown, in my honest opinion. I pictured the Revival being on SmackDown when they were being called up. I was like, you know what? I think they would be very, very good for SmackDown. And considering Monday Night Raw has really treated them like trash, and honestly, it's not their fault, the Revival. It's not really their fault. They've been very unlucky with, they've been very, very unlucky with injuries. So yeah, they've been very, very unlucky. And I think SmackDown, and I reckon they could use SmackDown Live as a good way to redeem the Revival. Next, we've got some women's trades. I've got Naomi for Alexa Bliss. Now, this one I think is definitely a good choice. Now, the reason why I say this is because I can definitely see Alexa Bliss losing the championship to Nia Jax, and if Monday Night Raw really wants their women's division to look really more credible, get someone like Naomi on their brand. Naomi she's a good wrestler, and I think Naomi on Monday Night Raw would be really good. And as for Alexa being on SmackDown, I liked Alexa more on SmackDown, honestly. I liked Alexa on SmackDown more, honestly. I feel like Raw I definitely feel like SmackDown is definitely her brand. I feel like she fits a lot better on SmackDown. Raw, look at her credibility on SmackDown. And I'll say this to you guys. Compare Alexa's 2 title reigns on SmackDown and compare her 2 title reigns on Raw. Which ones did you like more? I liked her runs on SmackDown more than I liked her runs on Raw. To me, her SmackDown reigns were better than her Raw reigns. So, I'm not saying bring Alexa to SmackDown and have her win the championship for a 3rd time. No, I'm not saying that. I think bringing her back to SmackDown and having Alexa turn face and actually downgrade her a little bit would definitely be good. But considering that they've made her a big star, they've got to keep her up there as one of the big stars, but maybe not with the championship, and I think that would be good. And I think Alexa Bliss really needs a goddamn face turn. People always talk about, characters getting stale. Well, what do you do with characters that are getting stale? You change them. That's what you do with characters that are getting stale. You change these characters. And that's the thing that they should have done with Bayley. Her character's gotten stale, and turning Bayley heel would have been a good option, but they've done it with Sasha. They did it with Sasha instead. So, whenever I hear someone tell me, whenever I hear my buddy King Schmidt mention that Alexa Bliss is stale, whenever he says that she's stale, I always say, well, what do you do with a character that is stale? You change it. So, what you do with a stale character, you change them. So, I think Alexa Bliss, when she comes over to SmackDown, I think she should do a Charlotte Flair when she came over to SmackDown. When Charlotte Flair arrived on SmackDown, she was a heel, and then a few weeks later, she became a babyface. I reckon they could do that with Alexa. So, that's just my honest opinion on that. That's my honest opinion, and those are my thoughts on those two. The next one is another women's one. I've done 3 of them in a row, so this is the next one, and then the next one afterwards. The next women's trade I would do is Becky to Raw for Sasha Banks. Now, I don't see WWE doing this at all. I don't see WWE doing this at all, and I'm going to tell you why I just don't. The reason why I don't see them doing this is because it's WWE. I think moving Becky to Raw and moving Sasha to SmackDown would be the best decision that WWE could make, because Becky was the first woman to be drafted to SmackDown in 2016. To SmackDown. Who was the second woman drafted to Raw? Sasha Banks. Charlotte was the number 1 draft pick for the women. Becky was the number 1 draft pick for SmackDown. Charlotte was the number 1 pick for Raw. So my honest opinion, Sasha and Becky being changing brands, that would definitely be a good one. Becky versus Mickie James. Becky versus Nia. Becky versus, anybody else that you've got on Raw. Same thing for Sasha. Sasha versus Natalya. They could put on some good matches. Natalya and Sasha Banks and, other people, even the NXT call-ups will definitely help out some of the matches that they've got. So there are some good options there. I think new opponents is the number 1 reason why I would move Becky and Sasha. Now this one is gonna blow your minds, because this one's gonna be making you guys question, how am I gonna do this? Charlotte Flair to Monday Night Raw for Asuka to SmackDown. Now, your first glance could be thinking, well, how are you gonna do that? Well, this one is actually not too difficult to do. And I'll tell you why this one isn't so difficult to do. The reason why I say this is not too difficult to do is because you can do this at WrestleMania. You could have it at WrestleMania. You could have Kurt Angle and Daniel Bryan making a little agreement. If Asuka wins, she joins the SmackDown brand. Okay, you can easily do that. You can easily do that, and you can easily just draft Charlotte Flair to Raw that way. But what I would do is that I would have it as if Asuka wins. You have her win the SmackDown Women's Championship, and then you could have maybe Kurt Angle come out and mention that he and Daniel Bryan came to an agreement to make a trade during this match. And that trade was Asuka to SmackDown for Charlotte Flair to Raw. I think that, and I reckon that would be a really good way to change their brands. Anyway, guys, like I said, with all these draft picks, it's up to you guys what you would do with them as well, and do you think they are good. I think so far I've done a pretty good job. The next one I've got is a tag team one. The Usos for the Bar. Now, this one is obviously an obvious one. We all know why we would want these two to change. Because they've done everything on their brands. They have done everything. The Usos have done everything on SmackDown. They've been the most legit and best tag team on SmackDown. And the Bar's the same, you know. But honestly, I really liked the Bar more than the Usos because the Bar, they started out hating each other. The Cesaro and Sheamus storyline they did with them was really good. I really enjoyed the storyline they did with them. You know, not really liking each other, then eventually getting along to win the tag team titles, beating the New Day. And you had Cesaro as the face and Sheamus as the heel. Then eventually Sheamus would turn face with Cesaro and they would both get along. And then eventually when the Hardy Boys won the titles from them, they both became heels and it's really been good. I've really enjoyed the Bar storyline through their growth as a tag team. And they're also a very good team. They're a very good team. Both teams are good. And I think and it's the same thing with Becky and Sasha with these two. Fresh new opponents. That's all I would say. Fresh new opponents for both of these teams. And having them switch brands would definitely be good as well. So that's my overall thoughts on that. You guys let me know what your thoughts on that are as well. And actually I've got two more. I've got two more trades. Sorry about that, guys. See, I told you you'd see my head if I'm trying to look at the list. And finally, guys, well, there's two more trades left before we move on to NXT. The next one is Randy Orton for Finn Balor. Now, this is just me making a prediction that I see Finn Balor winning the Intercontinental Championship, and Randy Orton and Finn Balor are going to be traded. Are going to be traded to Raw and SmackDown, respectively. So that's my overall thoughts. I haven't really said my thoughts yet, but that's overall how I would set up the draft. Like just having them just change brands would be good. Randy Orton, I think he really needs to be on Raw at this point. Even though I'm a SmackDown fan and I'm a big fan of Randy Orton's, I really think that Randy Orton going to Raw with the United States Championship is a lot better than having Rusev, who doesn't even deserve to be in the match, you know, get the championship. Now, obviously, if Rusev did win the championship, then obviously this trade wouldn't really happen. Well, Randy Orton can still go to Raw, but he wouldn't have the championship. I think Randy Orton needs to go to Raw with a championship, in my honest opinion. Rusev can always win the Intercontinental Championship. I mean, think about that, guys. Don't you think Rusev would look a lot better with the Intercontinental Championship? Yeah, think about that. Think about that one. I think Rusev will look great with the Intercontinental Championship around his waist, because he's already had the US title twice. And finally, guys, my final trade choice is this: Jinder Mahal to Monday Night Raw for Elias to SmackDown. Now, why did I do this one? Now, okay, this one's a little bit more. This one is more of me just picking two because I really wanted to try and see if I can think of anybody. Jinder Mahal to Raw, the reason why is because, well, it's kind of obvious. You know, he's a big sweaty dude. He's a big sweaty dude with fake ass muscles with steroids. And we all know Vince loves his big dudes. We all know Vince loves his wrestlers with muscles. And even though we know his muscles are fake as hell. And we know his muscles are fake as hell. So the obvious thing here is that he would want Jinder Mahal because he's a big sweaty dude with fake ass muscles. And we all know we all know those are fake ass muscles. So please don't tell me that he really has been working out. Those are steroids as hell with Jinder Mahal. And as for Elias being on SmackDown, I kind of pictured Elias more on SmackDown. I honestly have. I honestly thought Elias would thrive better on SmackDown. Even though Raw has done a... I will say this. Raw has done a pretty good job with Elias. I really didn't think Raw would have done well with him. But Raw has done a pretty good job with him. But I honestly think Elias would definitely feel a lot more impressive on SmackDown. That's just my honest opinion. That's my honest opinion about that one. And finally, guys, let's talk about the NXT. Let's talk about the NXT picks. Let's talk about the NXT picks that we've got set up as well. Anyway, guys, let's talk about NXT. Let's talk about NXT. And this is what I decided to come up with. I have decided to come up with, like I said, I decided to do 5 picks for NXT. Why 5? Because in my opinion, I see a lot of NXT picks happening this year. In my opinion, I see quite a lot of them, and I see a total of 10. Now, again, this is all my opinion, and I could be wrong. So let's get this one. So let's get the NXT draft picks underway. Let's get the NXT draft picks underway. For Monday Night Raw, and this is my honest opinion for NXT, for Monday Night Raw, I see them having Drew McIntyre. And the reason why I say Drew McIntyre is because I really think Raw really needs some big names for Raw. And what a good name to have. And what a good name to have then, Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre is definitely somebody that Monday Night Raw can definitely have. He would be a good name, and he would be a good help for their mid-card division, especially if they have the United States Championship or the Intercontinental Championship on that brand. Drew McIntyre would really fit in very well on that brand. The next Raw one would be Ember Moon. Now, some people might consider this one as an obvious one. Monday Night Raw would pick up Ember Moon because let's see this. Let's think about this let's use our logical heads here for a sec. If Asuka goes to SmackDown, and if Sasha Banks and Alexa Bliss end up on SmackDown, and Raw gets Becky and Charlotte, then obviously they would want another big name. And that other big name would be none other than Ember Moon. Considering SmackDown just got Asuka and Sasha Banks on this draft, you would think it'd be obvious if they picked up Ember Moon. And even though I think Ember Moon would be better off on SmackDown, I think Raw is definitely her brand, considering who she is, and considering her character would probably fit more better on Raw than on SmackDown. If I'm going to be completely honest with you all. The next Raw one, by the way, these are all Raws I'm reading out. The next Raw run I see being possible is a tag team. And that tag team one for Monday Night Raw, in all honesty, would be the Authors of Pain, Akam and Razor. And again, like I said with my draft, I moved some decent teams from SmackDown to Raw. Just think about this. With the Authors of Pain being on Raw, with them having the Usos, Gable and Benjamin, and some of the other teams that they've got on that brand, just think of how cool it just would have been if that's what they had. And it would be really, really cool. Authors of Pain being on Raw, they could definitely be the Authors of Pain can easily be the Bludgeon Brothers of Monday Night Raw. They can easily be the Raw version of the Bludgeon Brothers. Destructive, dominant. You know, it would just be freaking awesome. Just be freaking awesome if the Authors of Pain were on Raw. So, that's my honest opinion about that. That is my honest opinion about the Authors of Pain. I think they could easily be I could see them as the Raw's version of the Bludgeon Brothers. Next is Andrade, Cien Almas, and Zelina Vega. Excuse me. Oh, my apologies for that one. I think it's kind of evident that Andrade Cien Almas is going to be called up. I don't want anyone telling me, no, he won't be called up. He'll stay in NXT. He's the NXT champion. And I'm going to tell you guys this right now. I see Andrade Cien Almas losing the NXT Championship to Aleister Black, and this is going to bring Andrade Cien Almas to the main roster. It's just far too predictable. Because he's ready. All the people that I've got on this list that I have listed on my draft, they're all ready. And I'm saying this because I know they are ready for the main roster. And if any of you disagree with me, that's fine. But I'm just saying that these are all my opinion and who I think should be ready for the main roster. And I think would be very, very good for each brand. So, Andrade Cien Almas being brought up to Monday Night Raw, I think he'd be a great Mexican, especially if they've got the United States Championship on Raw. Just think about that. Like, imagine him as United States Champion. Because I believe Andrade Cien Almas is a Mexican guy because he's got that Mexican look about him. He's got that lucha libre about him. So I'm guessing he's a Mexican. Like, so just look at it. So just look at it as that way, as like him as a Mexican on Monday Night Raw, sabotaging the United States Championship. I think that would be very, very good, especially for Mr. Almas and his character. Like you can have him chastise the Americans. It'd be really, really awesome in my opinion. And the final person for Monday Night Raw. Now this one I had to think very, very hard about because I was looking at the NXT roster and I was thinking, who else could be ready? In my opinion, who else is ready? That's just what my brain was doing. I'm like, who else is ready for the main roster? So I looked at the options that I had, and I have come to the conclusion that I think Monday Night Raw, and my final choice for Monday Night Raw from NXT call-ups, my final choice is the UK champion, Pete Dunne. Now, some people might wonder why Pete Dunne. I think Pete Dunne because, I mean, like, I've seen what he's like on NXT. I mean, like, do I even need to go over it? He's ready as hell. I could, just by looking at him, just by looking at the fact that he's been the UK champion for nearly it is probably even approaching 300 days. I mean, like, he's friggin' great. He's a friggin' good wrestler. And I honestly think he's ready. I honestly think he's ready for the main roster. He could bring the UK Championship up to the main roster with him, you know? Like you could come up with a solution of having, you know, maybe the Cruiserweights for the SmackDown brand, and you could have the UK belt for the Raw brand, you know? Like, you can, like, why else? Like just think about this. Like, what has Pete Dunne even done with that UK belt? Like, yeah, he's a good wrestler, but I think I've only seen him defend it like once or twice on NXT's brand. I mean, like, having the UK belt or maybe on Raw, having an extra championship, that wouldn't be a bad idea, but honestly, I'll leave that up to you guys as well. Like I said, some of these I'm leaving up to you guys in case if you want to chime in and you tell me your thoughts. Now let's go over to SmackDown Live and see who I have chosen for the NXT for the SmackDown brand. And the first one is none other than Johnny Gargano. Why Johnny Gargano? Again, because he is freaking ready. What else does he need to do in NXT? Oh yeah, he's in the middle of a feud right now with Tommaso Ciampa. But I'm telling you guys this. He's freaking ready. He's ready. He is absolutely ready for the main roster. I don't see Shane McMahon being at WrestleMania. If you want me to tell you why I think Johnny Gargano will be on SmackDown Live, I'm going to tell you guys this right now. Shane McMahon won't be at WrestleMania. And this is just my guess. He won't be at WrestleMania. I actually think he won't be at WrestleMania because of what's going on with him. Daniel Bryan is going to choose a partner. And what a better partner would be than his mini-me, Johnny Gargano. Think about that, guys. Think about that. The team of Daniel Bryan and Johnny Gargano against the Yep Movement, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. Johnny Gargano on the SmackDown brand. Everybody would love to see Johnny Gargano on SmackDown. And everybody would want to see that potential feud between Johnny Gargano and Daniel Bryan. Jesus Christ, guys, just think about it. Just think about that. And if you guys hear any noise in the background, I do apologize for that. I got family members here. My family members are going a bit crazy. Anyway, so yeah, think about that one, guys. Think about that. Johnny Gargano and Daniel Bryan as partners against the Yep Movement. I think that will be freaking awesome. And I'm pretty sure 90% of you would agree with me. Next one for SmackDown Live is women, because like I said, we've got Ember Moon. So the next woman's slot for Monday Night Raw, SmackDown Live, in my opinion, is definitely two girls who I believe are ready, no matter what anybody tells me. Their call up to the main roster has been long overdue. Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, the iconic duo. These two girls need to get the hell out of NXT. I'm really sick and tired of them in NXT. I'm really sick and tired of how they are booked in NXT, how they get treated in NXT. It makes me sick. It makes me sick just watching the fact that how NXT handle those two girls. They are championship material. Those two were definitely championship material when they were pushing them. But NXT foolishly kept, putting them in title situations, but then just then just bury them 6 feet under. Then a few months later, they would bury them 6 feet under. They need to be out of NXT. Billie Kay and Peyton Royce can definitely be a great asset for SmackDown. Enough said. Next is a tag team, and this one I believe is very, very plausible, and I see this one coming. That one is Sanity. I see Sanity coming, and I think SmackDown, even though I think a lot of people would agree that Raw would be best suited for them, but I think for the time being, I think SmackDown Live would definitely be a good brand for Sanity. Like you could start them out on SmackDown, give them a nice little give them a nice little rub on SmackDown, and then eventually move them over to Monday Night Raw. But honestly, guys, I'm just going to tell you guys this honestly. Do you honestly trust WWE with sanity? When Vince McMahon, and I'm telling you guys this, and I think a lot of you would agree with me, since Vince loves his big, sweaty men, I see this happening. As soon as Vince McMahon catches his eyes on Killian Dane, he would want to get Killian Dane out of sanity and have Killian Dane as one of his guys. I see it. I definitely see that happening. I definitely see Vince McMahon wanting Killian Dane out of sanity, and he would want Killian Dane on his brand. I think that's very, very plausible. I see that one being very plausible, and I see it happening. That's just my honest opinion. So honestly, guys, just hope and pray sanity, get a good run before Vince McMahon decides to completely take away the team. Next is Tommaso Ciampa. This one I would definitely love to see. I would love to see Tommaso Ciampa end up on SmackDown, so then that way they can continue the whole feud with Gargano and Ciampa on the main roster. It would be great, It would be great to see them continue their rivalry on the main roster. Yeah, some people might say that, SmackDown might ruin the whole perception of the rivalry and all that shit. Honestly, it doesn't matter. You get to see the rivalry. NXT have done this way too late. It was way too late for NXT to do this. Tommaso Ciampa got injured. So that's NXT's own fault. It's NXT's own fault. They took too long with it. Ciampa got injured, and of course it wasn't Ciampa's fault that he got injured, but I'm just saying, they've done this a little too late. So in order to capitalize and make this rivalry great is to send them both to the main roster. And make it a good rivalry on the main roster. You can definitely create it on the main roster. NXT doesn't need to create everything. Just saying. And finally, guys, the last pick for SmackDown for the main roster. Again, this one's a lot like Pete Dunne. I had to look at who was on the roster and who I think would be good choices to take out of that brand onto the main roster. This one was a no-brainer, considering that he was one of the other big names besides Pete Dunne at the time for the mid-card. And that is Roderick Strong. I think SmackDown would be a great brand for Roderick Strong. At first I was thinking, maybe 205 Live could have him. But at the same time, though, people might not like the fact that he's on 205 Live. Some people may think Roderick Strong should be a main roster guy like Johnny Gargano. But yeah, I reckon Roderick Strong to SmackDown Live, because I think that would be good. I think that would be good for the brand. It would be good for SmackDown. As they've got some pretty good they'll have some pretty good mid-card talents. When that time comes. So anyway, guys, that has been my fantasy draft. That is everything that you need to see with this fantasy draft. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys liked my fantasy draft. I feel like this was definitely a lot better than my previous one. It's totally up to you guys on what you think down below of all my draft picks. Do you agree with any of my draft picks? Could there be any draft picks that you would change? Would there be any you would change in the place of the ones that I've done? Do you agree? Do you agree with most of the ones that I asked for? So anyway, guys, thank you all for joining me for this fantasy draft part 2, and I will catch you all next time. See you then, guys.